Louisville getting stripped of its 2013 national championship in basketball was real. They were the first and to date only team in the history of Division I men's basketball to have a title vacated, meaning that, technically speaking, they never won this game against Michigan, and this entire national championship never happened. The reason why Louisville was stripped of its national championship had to do with the scandal that became publicized a couple of years later, where it was revealed that Louisville committed a plethora of NCAA violations and broke just about every rule under the sun with regards to bringing prospective players to campus. Having a title stripped is unusual and has to be a weird feeling, because it's not as though you can forget that it ever happened, and not one single Louisville fan was celebrating after they beat Michigan in 2013 and was thinking to themselves, well, I hope we keep our title and it isn't stripped away afterwards. No Seattle Seahawks fan refused to celebrate the Super Bowl this year, thinking that the NFL would take away their title years down the road for something that happened during the 2025 season that no one publicly knows about yet. But to say that Louisville fans felt outrage for having a title stripped from them would be putting it lightly, because it's as if everything you just watched and celebrated was revealed to be a giant lie by the governing entity. Well, this wasn't the only title that Louisville had stripped from them in men's basketball, because as it turns out, if I had a nickel for every time Louisville had a title stripped from them in men's basketball, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. Technically, the most recent title that Louisville won was this one right here in 1986. But even that was stripped away from them, sort of. Because what followed was an April Fool's prank gone horribly wrong that led to considerable outrage that deserves a deep dive exactly 40 years later if you're watching as of the upload date of this video. Because this is the story behind what might just be, considering the circumstances, the dumbest controversy in the history of the Final Four. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, hype up that video, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of sports with stories like this one that you may not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and for hyping up the video, and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about the time that many thought that the Ville got grilled. But before I talk about what exactly transpired after the game, we need some context to understand what happened during the game itself. It's March 31st, 1986, and we find ourselves at Reunion Arena in Dallas for the national championship between Louisville and Duke. It was Denny Crum against Coach K, as in a heavyweight battle between two men who would go down as the greatest coaches of all time. Louisville was looking for their second title in program history and their first since 1980, while Duke was looking for its first ever title and was looking to finally get over the hump after going 37-2 in their first 39 games, setting a program record at the time for most wins in a season. And in what turned out to be a great competitive game, Louisville erased an 8-point deficit to come back and win it 72-69 thanks to some late free throws, winning their second title in program history, as this would be the last time that Duke ever blew a lead in an NCAA tournament game. It never happened again. Herbert Crook had a double-double for the Cardinals with 10 points and 12 rebounds, while Purvis Ellison not only added a double-double of his own, but led the way with 25 points on a whopping 72% shooting. Just like that, the Cardinals were national champions, fending off a Duke team that was favored and somehow clawing back from a stretch earlier in the season where they were 11-6 and were in danger of falling out of the AP top 20. Somehow, after all of that, Louisville ended the season on a 17-game winning streak and won the national championship. Louisville fans were pumped and were partying, and understandably so, seeing as their team just won the Natty and did it in dramatic fashion in a true back-and-forth affair. But the celebration, unfortunately for Louisville, would be short-lived. Because as it turns out, Louisville cheated throughout the game and throughout the entire tournament. You think a team could go from 11-6 to a 17-game winning streak just through good coaching and gelling together and tinkering with the lineup and improving naturally? Of course not. They were cheating. They were using drugs. And after the game, when the Louisville players got tested, the tests came back positive, meaning that the championship was illegitimate and that the championship results were on hold until further notice. Louisville, despite winning on Monday by 3 points, wasn't the champion just yet. The one to break the story was Mike Preston, a disc jockey for KMGC, a radio station in Dallas, as in a station in one of the largest media markets in the country and the city where the Final Four was held. Preston revealed the news at 6:40 a.m. the day after the game, and it seemed like Louisville fans who partied all night into the early hours of the morning would be in for a rude awakening. However, the championship game, as I mentioned earlier, was played on Monday, March 31st. The day after the game was April 1st, as in April Fool's Day. And as it turns out, Preston was only kidding. It was just a prank. No one on Louisville had actually taken drugs or failed a drug test, and Louisville was still the national champion. The hoax was revealed at 6:53 a.m., so for 13 minutes, people believed that Louisville might have their title stripped from them, and that Duke may have been hosed because Louisville fielded an ineligible team full of cheaters. But when the prank was revealed to be just that, as in a prank, oh man, to say that a controversy ensued would be putting it lightly. And I'm not talking about just a couple of people who were outraged about this and were gullible fans. I mean that the University of Louisville themselves got involved, as did the NCAA. Because when it came to April Fool's Day pranks, this one crossed a giant line. Now, I don't know what the spectrum is for April Fool's Day when it comes to pranks. There's a ton of gray area. We can all agree that telling someone that their shoe is untied when it really isn't is a completely harmless joke for the holiday. And we can all agree that calling your parents to let them know that you're in the hospital and were diagnosed with a terminal illness is an offensive thing to do with the holiday, and it crosses a giant line. Giving someone one ice cube instead of a couple of ice cubes is a good joke for April Fool's Day, while having someone get caught in a trap and sending them flying around a building and for setting up a de facto death trap for them, culminating in the person falling from the ceiling into a trash can, is not a good joke for the holiday, and it's offensive and crosses the line. However, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle where it could go either way. Preston obviously didn't see anything wrong with this, and neither did the radio station. KMGC General Manager Ross Reagan said that Preston even gave a disclaimer at 6:30, 10 minutes before the fake news broke, that today is April Fool's Day, and that you shouldn't believe everything you see. As Reagan said, he warned listeners that they should be real careful today because they're going to hear some wild stories. He came back on the air about 10 minutes later and indicated that the Final Four victory was in question and to stay tuned for more details. And he came back and developed this silly story about Louisville. On the one hand, you might be able to see a few problems with this, even if KMGC didn't. Number one, radio is not the same medium as television. If you put a disclaimer on television that today is April Fool's Day and this is just a joke, and that disclaimer is on the bottom of the screen the entire time, people know it's just a joke. But if you say a disclaimer on the radio, what good does that do if the person isn't listening to the radio at the time that you made the disclaimer. If I'm listening to the station on my morning drive during the entire time and I hear that disclaimer, all right, that's one thing. But if I turn on the station at 6:35, I completely miss the disclaimer and have no way of going back to rewind, since that's not a thing you do with radio. Or, because of the nature of radio, even if I was listening the entire time and never changed channels, maybe I got static and couldn't hear the disclaimer being said. Or I was talking with a friend of mine in the car and didn't hear what you said. But aside from that, drug issues aren't just serious matters, but they were things that were all too prevalent in sports back in the mid-'80s. Everything was peaking with drug usage in sports right around 1986. Exposés were coming out regularly about athletes, particularly in the NFL, doing cocaine, to the point where at the end of the 1985 season, just about every single player on the St. Louis Cardinals football team refused to take a drug test. And while we didn't know it at the time, this would result in a tragedy just a couple of months later, when at the 1986 NBA draft, the Boston Celtics drafted Len Bias, and he died of a cocaine overdose 2 days later. This isn't like Preston made up a matter that's completely outlandish, like the Cardinals got abducted by aliens. This was a matter that was extremely close to home, and was not only serious and could result in people dying, but could damage the reputation of completely innocent players who obviously didn't take the drugs, seeing as this was just a poorly conceived idea of a prank. This was a moment where they completely failed to read the room, almost like a company joking about laying people off after they already laid people off a couple of weeks ago. Dave Cowwood, the assistant executive director of the NCAA, commented on the matter and said that Preston's stunt was an irresponsible act. And Louisville director of sports information, Kenny Klein, who now has to deal with this false report in the middle of what should be a happy and prosperous time, albeit a hectic time for the university and the team, was equally livid, saying, "With all the talk about drugs in pro sports and filtering down to college, I just can't see how anybody would joke about that. What about the people who tuned in and didn't hear the disclaimer? I think there's no place to offer that." In fact, Klein was so livid that he informed the school's legal counsel about it, although no action ended up being taken. But just like that, this became an April Fool's prank that spiraled out of control and was now taking away from the moment of Louisville winning the national championship. Station General Manager Ross Reagan did not suspend Preston or punish him in any way whatsoever. Reagan thought that Preston, for the most part, did nothing wrong. He gave a disclaimer, he thought the idea of the NCAA holding a title away from a team was outlandish, and no one would believe it, and he was doing his job as a disc jockey on April Fool's Day. As Reagan said, some of the furor was taken out of context. Needless to say, we're thrilled for Louisville. We certainly don't wish to take away from the thrill of victory. I would rather that he had said that the game was in question because the basketball wasn't regulation size. But he certainly meant no harm. He was looking for a very silly, unbelievable premise. And unfortunately, some people in reporting what they thought had occurred took it seriously. But this is where that explanation falls apart. Because I'm not sure, especially in that climate, that a failed drug test is a very silly premise. The ball's not being regulation size? That's silly. The rim being measured at 11 feet instead of 10 feet? That's silly. It's like what Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon did all those years ago when doing the April Fool's Day prank about the Kansas-Davidson game. That was clearly silly. But a drug test? Especially in the sports climate and the political climate of the mid-1980s? Anytime you're talking about illegal substances, you're tiptoeing a really fine line, especially when it comes to kids. And let's just say, it's not too surprising that many thought that Preston stepped over that line. even after it was revealed to be one giant prank and a big April Fool's joke gone horribly wrong. Either way, whether Preston meant harm or didn't, I think we can all agree that this wasn't exactly the most well thought out joke, and Preston, Reagan, and everyone else at KGMC completely misunderstood the medium of radio broadcasting if they thought a disclaimer mentioned well beforehand was good enough. Because on this day in 1986, it wasn't Duke's basketball team, but rather the team at KGMC, from Mike Preston to Ross Reagan to everyone else, who was the true April Fool. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.